But right now, the state's leading police agency is behind when it comes to processing the evidence that in many cases is the key to solving the crime. ABC News 4's NATALIE CAULA explains in this special report.
This woman still lives in the shadow of the man she says attacked her almost 20 years ago.
He comes up for parole every 2 years.
Tamango McCord has been behind bars since 1999. He's sentenced to 100 years. But McCord could easily have been roaming the streets today. That's if a major piece of evidence didn't exist. In September 1993, the woman we will only identify as Jane was working inside her West Ashley shop. She lived in a studio in the back.
A guy broke into the back, shattered the window, broke in, beat me, robbed me, and raped me for less than $20.
And as quick as that, he was gone.
No one was ever caught. We had a partial fingerprint and a description, but no way to identify. It was a stranger. No way to identify who he was.
For Jane, the nightmare didn't end. In December 1995, more than 2 years later, he was back.
There was a box cutter to the side of my throat.
Jane says the man without a name raped her again and escaped again.
It was this strange blessing that he came back, because then the police picked the case back up.
The mystery man left his DNA behind. Now buried in this box of evidence, a rape kit. But in the 90s, there was nothing to compare it to until
he had broken into a gun shop and bled in the gun store. And that's where they had DNA.
They had a match, and the man Jane says tormented her for years was finally arrested. 20 years later, DNA testing is almost always collected from a crime scene and tested by the State Law Enforcement Division, or SLED, in Columbia. Solicitor Scarlett Wilson knows well what DNA evidence can do in a trial.
They provide that piece that sometimes makes or breaks a case.
But recently, the results take much longer to get back to police and prosecutors.
We're lucky in any crime, whether it's a rape or a murder, an armed robbery, if we get DNA within a year.
SLED's lab gets an average of about 300 DNA requests a month, but recent budget cuts are slowing down work at the lab.
And that just means a longer wait for defendants who may be in jail, for victims who are awaiting the outcome of their trial.
SLED's chief Mark KEEL blames lawmakers.
You know, the agency has gone through 3 years of budget cuts.
Those cuts have created a backlog that in September was reported at 4,500 cases. KEEL says most of those cases are burglaries, many of which the lab outsourced to a private lab. And despite the delays in testing for some violent crimes, he says they are doing their job, which is keeping the public safe.
Inside the lab, SLED's chief says its workers are doing everything they can, everything from working weekends to working overtime.
If we've got an offender out there on the street who's still committing crimes, we're going to do everything we can to provide that information to law enforcement.
But there is a bottom line. Without more money from the state, crime victims will just have to wait longer for justice to be served. Jane Doe says she's grateful for the missing link she says put McCord away for life.
It's such a vital tool to prevent crime even. If we can identify somebody before they commit something else, you can stop it, you can save other victims.
Jane says she hopes lawmakers realize the importance DNA testing has in keeping women like her out of the darkness. NATALIE CAULA, ABC News 4.
And Governor Nikki Haley says she's doing her part to fix the problem by giving SLED its fair share of money out of her executive budget.